Hello, everybody, and welcome to Carnivore Personnel Sideshow. This is Jacques.
And this is Biff.
So Biff reached out this week and he's like, hey, here's an idea for a sideshow, something we had mentioned in the past. And it's, first of all, it's the typical Mount Rushmore of X, Y, and Z. In this case, and we'll talk it out now about how we're going to go about it. The one problem I have, even before we start, Biff, is there another term for Mount Rushmore that means Mount Rushmore and everybody knows without saying Mount Rushmore? Because I think over the last umpteen years,
it has a bad history, right?
Yeah. We're talking two out of the four slave owners, and
well, not just that, but where it is, and I don't know if you know about how it happened. Also,
on stolen land.
Well, not just that, but so there's that part of it. And then there's a whole history about why it was created and how they got the funding for it, which is another. So kind of a side recommendation, if you could get hands on a Robert Wool, who you may remember from the Tim Burton Batman series. He did a show about American history, and so on HBO. So it's a great show. I'm trying to remember the name of it, so I'll see if I can find that name for another time. But if you can find that show, it's just he basically tells you the real history that is often masked by the kind of the so-called, I don't know, the popular history, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, so, no, I know what you're saying.
Yeah.
Like
the name of the show is Assume the Position.
Oh, okay. I will check that out, because
you can find it. Yeah,
stolen land, dubious accounting, slave owners, and now like one of the worst governors and the worst, you know what I mean? It's like, it has such, but the problem is everybody knows what you're talking about when you say the Mount Rushmore of this.
Yeah.
So we got to find another, a Last Supper or something.
Yeah.
I don't know.
That's 12 number. Yeah, whatever.
But until we do that, so what we're going to do is, and how I had first read it, and maybe I was going in a different direction, but on the same path, is we're going to talk, I don't know if you want to talk best or favorite, because I broke it down.
It actually doesn't. You know what? I purposefully did not specify what Mount Rushmore means, because you could define it however way you want. So I'm not going to tell you what the ground rules for your selection is. Like, we're going to, you're going to decide, and I'm going to decide how I came up with my four. So that I think what it means. So we could kind of the idea is that I don't really care about saying that this is the proper definition for Mount Rushmore. We're just going to figure out what this is going to be more of a negotiation than anything else.
And again, our musics are just vary so much, but I think we also know enough about some of the bands that each other's like that you're like, oh yeah, I can definitely see why you put it on.
I expect some crossover here. So
here's what I want to do. I'm just going to throw out. Okay, stop. We're talking rhythm sections, and for the layman, basically that means the drummer and bass player. Essentially, the rhythm section is, you have a rhythm guitar player. Sometimes you got keyboard player, but essentially in rock, when you're talking a rhythm section, you're talking the drummer and the bass player. And there are amazing bass players in great bands with really good drummers. There's amazing drummers with decent bass players. But what I went through is kind of my honorable mentions, the people I like. And then here are the four people that when I really got into music, I'm like, wow. And we'll get into the different reasons, like you said. But I want to say, I think I agree. And the top 10 of anybody's bands, top 20, but I'm going to say top 10. As far as rhythm sections, we're not talking the singers or the guitarist, but the rhythm sections, and we'll probably agree, it's got to be the Who, Zeppelin, and Jimi Hendrix band.
Mitch Mitchell?
Well, and what was his name? Hendrix, Mitch Mitchell, and Noel Reading, because and again, what Hendrix was doing with the guitar was just so unearthly and so fucked up and so next level. But these were the guys that held down the fort. And they
Sure.
didn't just hold down the fort going 2-4. You know, they were able to keep pace with him to set the boundaries, which he could then break and go outside. But if you ever get to hear, you know, just isolated tracks of Noel Reading and Mitch Mitchell together, it's like fun. And the funny story is Jimi Hendrix went to London to play a bunch of shows, and Noel Reading, who was a guitar player in a couple bands of note, he was a studio musician, he was a guitar player of note in London, and his manager's like, hey, I want you to come check out this guy. I'm gonna put you up to be his bass player. And I guess Noel Reading was pissed, like furious, like insulted, like you just slapped me in the face. And his manager says, just come to the club and just check it out.
Right.
He was about halfway through his first song when Noel leaned into his manager and said, please make me his bass player.
Right.
You know, but what are your thoughts on Zeppelin and the Who's rhythm sections?
Well, I think so. Are we getting into our list already, or?
Well, no, but these are the ones. I'm just going to
pre-discussions. Yeah,
but we know this is this has to. If you had a top 25, there would have to be on it.
Sure. Yeah, I think that so both of those guys are so both Keith Moon, John Bonham are, I think, you know, foundational monsters, right? Those guys kind of laid the groundwork. I think that I personally find the Who to be somewhat overrated. So I think I'm the wrong guy I'm not going to dismiss the importance of Keith Moon, but I think they're kind of overrated. Whereas I think, you know, John Bonham, as highly rated as he is, I think in many ways people kind of underappreciate why he is so great. I just think that I'm not a drummer, and yet there's all these things that I hear from him that just like, you know, my God, I mean, he's one of the, you know, in terms of, you know, incorporating different elements into the rock music, you know, sphere, you know, he's, you know, and that whole band was early in doing that. Like they kind of did some of what the Beatles did, in incorporating other forms of music or other styles and whatever, and certainly a lot of what the Beach Boys did. But I mean, Zeppelin, I think, just took it to a different level in terms of expanding what, you know, can be rock music, right, without being prog. So.
And again, I mean, Robert Plant is in a league of his own. Jimmy Page is in a league of his own. And
Jimmy Page, I also think overrated, but that's a different story.
I mean, but maybe overrated and a thief. Definitely a thief. Maybe overrated. Definitely a thief. But when I'm talking just the rhythm section, you know, John Paul Jones, he gets overlooked because he's in the shadow of Robert Plant and Jimmy Page and John Bonham. But literally, the way John Bonham and John Paul Jones work together, and the thing about, there's just so many drummers I listen to, and I'm like, nope, never going to be able to do that. And even the stuff from John Bonham, just a sidebar that kind of sounds simple-ish, like When the Levee Breaks. You listen to that song and it doesn't sound like a hard song to play. He doesn't do many changes. He doesn't do many tempo, you know, variations, but he is the king of these, what are known as ghost notes. Like these half notes, and it's like, it's a kind of a foot pause, but it's not. You know, but it's not a pause, but it's really subtle. And as far as the Who goes, you know, John Entwistle, if you don't like the Who, and again, you're talking Daltrey, who's just, you know, up there. You're talking Pete Townsend, beyond legendary status, and of course Keith Moon. But John Entwistle, to put it in your terms and in my terms, when you watch that, the history of hockey that the CBC did 20 years ago, and you see the other players talk about the greats, you know, when they're sitting around talking about Bobby Orr, and it's like, it's all his guys who he fought with and played against. And if you ever talk to bass players, and I'm talking the bass players of that era and bass players past, Entwistle, everybody will tell you, he, like Pete Townsend, can't go on those tangents, and Keith Moon can't do the shit that he does if Entwistle isn't just but again, when you're talking, the lead singers always get the credit. The guitar is sexy, the drums are everything. But those are the three. So
I think foundationally speaking, though, I would also throw in Black Sabbath in there. I think the Aussie part of it is somewhat overrated, but if you listen to what Geezer Butler did as a bassist player, and then obviously that those two combined, and I don't think that Bill Ward, the drummer, is a guy that really would ever be considered for this Mount Rushmore-ish kind of a scenario. But as a whole package, there was a foundational thing that they established, for a genre. So, and then maybe a little bit later on down the line, arguably, I would kind of put the Police in there, right? Because that rhythm section, it's amazing how, like, I saw them way later after they reunited, because they were basically done by the time I came to LA, so I never got to see them. But it's just amazing how in the groove that rhythm section is. Like, I was more impressed with the fact that like, I was never a big Sting guy, but how well that work, those two work together within the framework of their songs was actually, that's pretty impressive. So
I mean, and the thing is, they're both essentially studio musicians, can do every kind of music and every kind of genre, and they can play fast, they can play slow, completely different ways that they came at music. But just I mean, they're an amazing drummer, an amazing bass player on different paths, who found a way to make just 4 fucking unreal albums. Just unreal albums. So
wait, so which is the one that sucks?
Well, there's Outlandos d'Amor, Señata Mandata, Ghost in the Machine, Synchronicity,
and Regatta de Blanc.
Regatta de Blanc, 5. Duh. Right.
Why do I have to correct you on this? This is not even my real music.
And the funny thing is, I like each album. I love all 5 albums, but I like each one a little less. And it's funny. Another band I'm going to mention, our friend Hafen, loves the same band, but in reverse. He thinks he got better with every album. I'm like, but anyways,
I actually like Ghost in the Machine the best. I don't know why, but I really like that album the best.
Yeah, but there's a great documentary about them recording that album. I think they were like down in Jamaica and stuff. So before I got like 3 honorable mentions before I get into my top 4, but why don't you tell me some of your honorable mentions if you have some? And
sure,
why?
So I'm gonna start off with a studio guy, Jeff Porcaro. I don't know if you know who that is. He's the drummer for Toto.
Yes.
And Toto obviously is classic yacht rock stuff, but man, those guys, I mean, they did so much studio work. I mean, they were the backing band behind like all those Randy Newman albums, all the Michael Jackson albums. They're just that whole band was just they were all over the place. But obviously, he's really famous for the what's known as the Rosanna Shuffle. And if you listen to the breakdown of that Rosanna Shuffle, it's just like, yeah, that's so. And it's been analyzed by other people, but there actually is a video of Porcaro himself talking about how he got to it. So, and obviously, I'm not a drummer, so I'm not going to bother explaining it. But that's
no, it's I've seen amazing drummers like who's the guy for Dave Grohl? I saw Dave Grohl talking to the Foo Fighters drummer.
You're talking about what's it? Hawkins.
And the two of them talking about how many not hours but just weeks they tried. I mean, these are the best of the best drummers out there in the last 20 years, and they're like, fucking dude, I can't do that.
So and Stuart Copeland, obviously we already talked about him. The other guy that's in one of those foundational bands that we probably should have talked about is Ginger Baker and Cream, right? I mean, that I consider most of what Eric Clapton to be pretty much overrated, stolen garbage, but Cream was like pretty amazing stuff. But I think that was not because of Eric Clapton. He helped a lot, but I think there's a lot of other elements in there. Him and Jack Bruce are just absolute monsters. It's too bad that they hated each other. And then I'm going to go into kind of the more geek areas. And so I have like a few drummers in the kind of the prog rock area, which is Carl Palmer from Emerson, Lake and Palmer. And it's for the all the geek guys. There's a guy named Mike Portnoy, who is a prog rock drummer for Dream Theater.
Yep.
And the third guy is a guy who I'm sure you've never heard of, but there's a guy named Marco Miniman, who does some of the wackiest weird time stuff that I've ever seen. And he actually auditioned for Dream Theater after Mike Portnoy left. But it was one of those deals where he just kind of did it just to do it, kind of a thing. And then the last guy I'll throw out in there, because I think he was kind of one of those hard rock drum heroes, is Carmine Appice. It's supposed to be called Appice, I think is the proper pronunciation, but I think he goes by Carmine Appice. Vanilla Fudge. He was in the Rod Stewart's band. We did a short stint with like Ozzy, among other things. So he also did a stint with Ted Nugent, I want to say. But there's a lot of guys in that kind of vein. Even maybe you could even include somebody like Tommy Lee in that league in terms of a guy who kind of had this, bigger than life personality, kind of bringing the drummer out front, because the drummer usually was the guy that nobody knew the name of, right? So, those are some of the guys where they kind of put themselves up front. So I think that's my honorable mention.
No, those are great. I thought you'd be hitting me with some rhythm sections from, Japanese, again, the baby metal kind of.
Yeah, I'm not going to do that. I mean, there's plenty of great drummers, but you know what? I mean, yeah, no.
But what about rhythm sections? Like not just the drummers, like, yeah, Dream Theater is, because you could talk about like the Wrecking Crew when you talk about, like how Toto was a backing band and then there's these, great things. But I was specifically looking like, the tandem, like, the greatest, who's the greatest quarterback wide receiver, who's the greatest defensive pairing. So who is the greatest, in this case, the greatest pairing of like just a bass player and a drummer who just held it together, and again, you could make this
also, is that what you were doing? Because I did drummers and bassists as separate entities.
See, I did them as rhythm sections. But that's okay. But the thing is, you could with Keith Moon, and John Entwistle, you can make an argument for both of those. And that's why sure. When I was looking at it, okay, when you're looking at the best rhythm section, Hendrix is amazing and does amazing things, but it was truly those two guys that really helped him get to where he went or took everybody for the ride. Same thing with like Zeppelin, although Plant and Page get all the credit, honestly, Bonham and John Paul Jones, just what they laying the track and laying the framework, which, Page could go off of and then find his way home to, because they were just so amazingly solid and different. So that's how I was looking at it. But no, saying individuals is more than great. But that's why, like I said, so my honorable mentions, and this is where, one band, and I know I've made you listen to them, and I won't apologize, but they're called Archers of Loaf. And their lineup from like 90 to 95, they put out a few albums where there's sometimes it's just such bass drum driven music, and that pairing, I'm trying to think of the guy's name, Matt Gentling and I want to say Mark Price, were just I mean when I go back and listen to them, sometimes it's funny because the boys, my little guys now play piano and guitar, and being able to spot bass sometimes is an acquired skill. You know what I mean? Sometimes it basically, it kind of is the glue that holds the puzzle pieces together. But there's just some times where I'll like just turn bass up or just turn, mess with the settings a little bit. I'm like, you guys have to listen to this. You guys just, and more often than not, I get I can hear it, but why is my right arm trembling like this? I'm like, right, that's what he's doing. Honestly, selfishly, I got to be in a band with this guy, John, for a few years before, he left and formed his own band and then went down to Austin when I came out to LA. And when I go back and listen to the 100 songs that, I've recorded as a drummer in my band, like probably the 6-7 best musical songs, not best lyric, not best songs, but are the songs where he just literally kicked such amazing ass playing bass. And then my honorable mention before I get into my big four is his band Silver Scooter. They were on Sony. They were an Austin band in the late 90s, early 2000s. You know, I played a clip of them. I played their song Long Fences going out of last week's show. But again, it's like the drummer in that band is really good. He's not this wow, jaw-dropping Stuart Copeland guy, but his tempo changes, his time signatures, in conjunction with what John does on a bass, it really, that's why they wound up, going from Austin to Japan and doing so well. And then like most other bands, it's personality shit that, basically, too many bands, too many great bands.
Basically derailing the personality. Yeah, just like 100 other bands, thousands of other bands.
And again, and now, John looks back and he's like, we have so many conversations. He's like, I have no idea why I felt I had to leave Beyond Id to go to a different band instead of staying in both, because a lot of people do that, and I really messed up. And I'm like, because he did, like we did, like it was really
sure.
I mean, anyways, before it becomes a self-indulgent theater. Yeah. Okay, give me your four either drummers, bass players, and I'm going to give you my favorite rhythm sections.
Well, how are we going to do this? Because we're gonna. So the reason why I did this was here's the interesting part. I wanted to go drummer and bass player because first of all, I wanted to see which one you wanted to do first, because one of the ground rules was that we each get one veto. Okay. That means that, and so from your drummers list, okay, you get one automatically in. From my drummers list, I get to enter one automatically, and we specify those first. And then we do the same for the bass players. Okay. But within the entire conversation today, we each get to veto one suggestion that another makes, where we said, you know what, we're not talking about this guy anymore. But that has to be one of the drummers or one of the bass players. So here's where it kind of gets, hinky, where if we go with the drummer first, right? And if I use up a veto during the drum section, and then somebody horrifying comes up in the bass section, I've lost my veto already. So it's like a challenge. So I get one challenge.
So we'll do that.
So you want to take a minute to
no, I will take a minute because I did my homework.
Mm-hmm.
Based on my favorite rhythm sections. I want to throw out the four bands that if I was to put rhythm sections of bands on a Mount Rushmore, they would be the following: the Talking Heads rhythm section.
Very good one.
Drummer Chris Frank and his wife Tina Weymouth. And it's funny because I remember the last F&H cookout that you were able to have pre-COVID. I was talking to Stuber, and he started getting into playing bass, and I guess he had tried to play some Talking Head stuff, and he's like, I don't know what the fuck they're doing. I mean, and again, because David Byrne is David Byrne, that gets overlooked. Same thing, the Pixies, Kim Deal and Joe and Dave Lovering. I mean, one of the other bands I have, they get lumped in together, and I'll just say the other band is the Velvet Underground. And what they used to say about the Velvet Underground, they ended up 20 years later saying about the Pixies. Not a lot of people bought their albums when they first came out, but everybody who bought their albums started a band. And I won't get into when with the Velvet Underground, and they're on my list, but I'll stay with the Pixies for a second. Seriously, there are 5 albums, as those two as the rhythm section, and then what Kim Deal went on to do with the Breeders. Unarguably the most influential band of the, they started in the alternative rock, new wave era. They were kind of the precursor to grunge. So they were in that, their first 2-3 albums came out, but there isn't a grunge, alt rock, indie rock band who came out after 1990. who doesn't say, "Oh, my top favorite four bands," and even if they're on different sides of the spectrum, even if they're more pop or more.
See,
or
so
more
this is
punk.
where you go into your universe again, because you say most influential. So you're gonna
Well,
tell
no,
me
no,
that.
no, no, no. I quantified it in that realm, in the realm
Okay.
of
Okay.
alternative
Fine.
rock grunge.
Okay.
But
Fine.
any band that's come since then will point to those guys. Um, and same thing. U2, Larry Moen Jr. and Adam Clayton are the two most unheralded members of the most heralded band in the last 50 years. But seriously, Larry Moen's style of drumming is him and the guy from Buffalo Tom are the two guys I borrowed from the most when I was learning how to play the drums. But seriously, when you see documentaries with The Edge talking about how he's a good guitar player, he's
not.
but he's the first to say that. He's the first to come out and he says there's a great documentary called It Might Get Loud.
Oh yeah, yeah. I don't know why he was even in there.
You know, and
I watched it.
Right. And so you saw he's really honest. He goes, yeah, how the streets play, how the streets have no name. It's the easiest song. It's these two chords. I run it through this, and this is the sound I get. When I think about great guitarist, I put him in the great guitarist thing because I love his sound. He has such a signature sound. You know, it's a U2 sound because of all of them. Like if the first three notes are on bass, I know it's Adam Clayton. If it starts off with the drums, I know right away. Like they each have their distinctive way, but that's why it's my rhythm section. And then honestly, the third drummer that I borrowed from the most when I learned to play the drums, and we had a song on our first record called Mo in honor of Maureen Tucker, Mo Tucker from the Velvet Underground. Mo Tucker and John Cale, that rhythm section for, again, they're one of those bands that a lot of people didn't know when they were out. A lot of people didn't buy their albums when they first came out, but it's hard to find a band through the 70s or the 80s in rock and all kinds of forms of music, new wave, pop, that became grunge, that don't say what an influence Maureen Tucker was in the drumming, and John Cale is just a musician's musician. So that's mine. Okay, now thank you for indulging me. Now
Lou Reed is absolute garbage. I will say right now, Lou Reed is garbage.
Is singing or guitar playing or songwriting?
I can't say for the songwriting because I think all their songs suck. But so I guess must be something about his songwriting that appeals to people. So I'm not going to judge that. But his singing and his guitar playing are garbage.
Yeah, but then again, you could make that argument about so many bands, but that band is one of the most influential bands in music.
Not questioning any of that. You know what the thing that's really annoying about the Velvet Underground fans though? So many of those guys are telling me about how great this music is and telling me about this is how you play a guitar. And it's like, no, this is garbage. You just like this stuff. You have no idea what you're talking about. This is a garbage guitar solo. He should just skip the solo and just did some kind of a rhythmic bridge and then go on to the next verse. His guitars.
Yeah, no. I mean, the great thing about them for me is they just did music in such a different way. They just took, there's songs like it's called The Gift on White Light, White Heat is the album. Anyway, I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole. Yeah. Biff, why don't we start out with drummer? Who are you putting up for your drummer?
My four drummers. Okay, so one of them we already mentioned, John Bonham, Led Zeppelin, right? It's kind of, I just think just the foundation. I mean, from that early modern rock era, I don't think that there is a more important drummer, and maybe arguably most important drummer, just kind of almost ever. Also, and my list is alphabetical, so it's actually, I'm going to jump all over the place. The second guy I'm going to mention is a guy you probably never heard of. Is a guy named Dave Lombardo.
Yeah.
Okay. And the reason why I put him in there is that, just like you'll no doubt have your, the chick from Velvet Underground, this guy's drumming has basically established a drumming for an entire branch of hard rock and heavy metal. I mean, this is, his power, double bass, that whole thrash drumming is the foundation for an entire multiple genres of music. So for that, for that reason, he's in there. The next one is Neil Peart, because he's freaking Neil Peart, right? And so arguably, if you're gonna tell me, rhythm section, Zeppelin and Rush probably would have been in there, along with, for me, Cream and the Police would probably likely be my 4 if you were gonna go that route. But anyway, so which means completely different list. What a shock. The fourth guy I have is the guy that I put in there because he's a drummer I like, and he's a guy named Cozy Powell, who's he's a very good drummer. I don't think he's but he's just been all over the place. Jeff Beck Group, all these hard rock bands, Whitesnake, Gary Moore, Rainbow. So he's just a guy that has been all on a bunch of these bands that I like a lot. So those are my 4.
Dude, it's hard to say. I mean, because it's hard to whittle it down to 4 because Bottom, Neil Peart, I mean, Stuart Copeland, fuck. So when I think of my list, I think of it a little differently. I think of it as, the guys that I ripped off the most.
Okay. Sure.
The guys that I emulated. I mean, because, when I get to college, I didn't play anything, and life threw a couple curveballs my way, and hockey, the road for hockey came to an abrupt halt, and I had to take my absolute anger and everything. And, I luckily I fell into, a band, met a couple guys who, and I just put on headphones, and it's like, these are the bands I like. But then I started listening to things differently. The only two people that, you're right, 3 people, like Mo Tucker from the Velvet Underground would be on my list. Okay. Somebody you don't know, but the band, Tom McGinnis from Buffalo Tom, and for me, Larry Moen Jr. And I'm not saying that Larry Moen Jr. could carry Stu Copeland's bass pedal around. He can't. I'm not saying that Neil, of course Neil Peart is just like, yes, of course he's on the list. We don't have to discuss that. Same with John Bonham. But for me, the list would be, Mo Tucker, Tom McGinnis, Larry Moen Jr. But if from the group that you have, gosh, I mean, I love Keith Moon, but that John Bonham's style and just the big bass drum sound, like just close your eyes and just pick the bass drum. I've never seen a bigger bass drum in my life, and somebody who just knew how to fucking beat the shit out of that. Or not beat the shit out of it, but just do these weird off timing, foot things that I listened to today. It was just the other day. I put the heads on and I'm playing when the levee breaks. And if I was scoring myself on the Rock Band version of it, I'd be like, yeah, it was probably 75 to 82, but it's that goddamn half note foot thing that he does in the middle of a pregnant pause. It's like, fuck you for being so good. It sounds simple, but it ain't.
Well, but he does so many of these, if you talk about like a song like A Fool in the Ring, which is like nothing else that they've really done. But if you look at his drumming there, I don't know what led them to do that song, period. But there's a lot of these funky, jazzish, stuff in there. I mean, I think obviously he's known a lot because his, drums, sound big, right? But then it's all that stuff that, you kind of catch on, but as a non-drummer, I don't understand. It's like, that's not like a rock drum, so. Okay, so wait, who's your 4th? I got Mo Tucker, Tom McGinnis, Larry Mullen Jr., and who's your 4th?
I'm gonna throw on Bonham.
What?
It would have to be John Bonham.
All right. So we got Bonham as an agreement, so we'll put him in on automatically, right? So he gets a virtual bye because he got, we agreed on that. So we'll go ahead and throw him in. So go ahead and pick the one person that you'll put in automatically.
I'm gonna say Tom McGinnis.
Tom McGinnis. All right.
Buffalo Tom.
All right. All right, and I'm gonna pick Cozy Powell because he's my favorite drummer, and I'm just gonna fucking put him in. He's not the guy that should be in there among the list, but I'm gonna put him in anyway. So, among the other ones, between Larry Mullen and Mo Tucker, who do you want to push first?
Gosh, I didn't have a song dedicated to Larry Moen Jr. on one of our albums, but I'd have to take him because of his body of work. You know, I mean, 40 years, dude. The band's actually more than 40 years. The band's been together since like 77.
Sure.
You know, 77, 78, and how he's changed with music, how he's helped change music.
Right.
You know, it's just, you know, a guy who's been killing it for that long. You know, I would definitely, you know, no disrespect. Funny thing, Mo Tucker, you know, to be a female drummer in a rock band in the 60s, and she was a stand-up drummer, by the way. She's played standing. Yeah. But I would have to kick her to the curb.
But do you think that it's going to be? Can you really argue that we should be putting Larry Mullen Jr. over Neil Peart? Because
no, I can't. But depends on what. I mean, if I was on a desert island, I could only listen to Neil Peart or Larry Mullen. I'd take Larry Mullen.
Sure.
Because I can tap along and keep up with Larry Mullen Jr. I mean, for Christ's sakes, you know, and again, like same thing, you know, Neil Peart wasn't great on an album or a song or I mean, we're talking how many albums, how many decades of just awesomeness. Yeah. But again, it's you know, it's almost like, you know,
I mean, can you arguably say that, I mean, Larry Mullen Jr. is more influential than Neil Peart?
And this, in some senses, yes, because
overall, just flat out within the world of music.
Yes, because, and here's my reasoning. I
think you're wrong.
No. Give me a second. Give me a second to put it. In terms that we can both understand. I'm gonna say. It's like this. It's like if Neil Peart is Wayne Gretzky and you know a Larry Mullen Jr. is like a Jeff Carter. More guys can model their game after Jeff Carter, you know, and make it to the NHL. More people can model their game around him.
Yeah, so that's nice.
So like it's not fair to say, you know, hey, this guy who played in the NHL for 15 years and is a great team captain, and you know, and you can look at him and say, I want to play like him, I want to be like him. You look at Gretzky highlights and you just all you can do is look at him. So Larry Mullen Jr. probably influenced a lot more people who started bands.
I think that's a garbage argument. I think basically we're talking about how many kids do you think said, you know what, I want to be Neil Peart and I'm going to buy Pearl drum set because I want to be like Neil Peart. I mean, how many people did that with Larry Mullen Jr. compared to, say, Neil Peart, right? I mean, really, this is what I'm talking about in terms of, you know, who was influential, right? I mean, I get it in terms of once you get into it, I said, you know what, I could be like that guy. I get that argument, right? But when it comes down to it, really, I mean, more than you know, I mean, Neil Peart.
No, because you know, because we look at it in different ways. But honestly, you can look at you can name 10 drummers who came out after like 1985, 1990, after Streets Have No Name, who really borrowed stuff from them, you know, who are in that album. Dude, you can't put anybody in Neil Peart's category except, you know, I don't know.
Well, not as a groundbreaker, but there's plenty of people, you know, who will play his stuff. Like my aforementioned, you know, Mike Portnoy is you know, basically that band, you know, bunch of like, you know, Boston. Well, not all of them from Boston, but a bunch of guys at Berkeley Music who, instead of doing jazz music, they were doing Rush covers. That's how.
Right. But then again, that's what you're there. You just said it right there. 90. I only know one band from Berkeley who made it. I know a lot of Berkeley musicians who are such better musicians, such better classically trained, awesome musicians. They don't make good bands. You know, I'm not Neil Peart is, you know, is the exception in all those guys. But generally speaking, I really think a Larry Mullen Jr. is somebody who's more people can listen to and say, yeah, I want to play like that. I want to be in a band like that. You just listen to Neil Peart, and it's the same thing.
I
It's
mean,
like,
what you effectively said earlier with your argument is that if you're going to do a Mount Rushmore of hockey, I'm going to put Jeff Carter in there instead of Wayne Gretzky. That's what you effectively have argued. I think your argument really tells me that Neil Peart is the more important one. And and the funny thing is, I say this, I objectively, I would prefer to put Dave Lombardo in the list because he is so much more important to the stuff that I really, really like to listen to. But I can't argue there is no way I can argue the fact that Neil Peart is one of the just flat out one of the most important, drummers in rock music, period.
But here's the thing. I love Rush, but I don't listen to a ton of it. And sometimes it's just a little too much. It's like, he does this great
I am actually in 100% agreement with you.
But like I like right now, I can listen to Red Barchetta and I can listen to In Through the Out, a couple of their albums. But honestly, if I'm doing a workout and the music's on shuffle, sometimes I just fast forward through it. Like there's nothing that's going to come out on,
but I mean that kind of an argument, right? You're just, we're kind of like, going in. So because
but
there
I'm
is
going
never
with
a
what
time,
I love and my my Mount Rushmore. If I'm looking up to the people who inspire me that I love, I'm looking up at Larry Moen Jr. and Neil Peart is amazing, but he's not the guy that I'm saying, he's who I want to listen to most.
Sure. Yeah. But I'm just, so still like you haven't made a compelling argument as to why Larry Mullen deserves to be on the Mount Rushmore more than Neil Peart, except for the fact to say, I like him better.
Yeah.
That's where we're at.
That's it. That's, and because that's, I'm looking at the official rule book. No, there's nothing in the rule book that says an elephant can't pitch.
That's correct. Yeah.
But that's it, if you want to put him up, I'm not going to make an argument. I'm not going to say that's a veto. I'm not going to put him up there, but I'm just saying like, my top four, he's not in there, but I understand your thinking and I wouldn't fight it.
You wouldn't fight it.
I take Bonham over him for sure. Just
we both have
so many
Bonham,
different
right?
things. Yeah.
Right. So, all right. So are we settled on at least Neil Peart being on this list?
Correct. Yes.
Okay. So we'll move on to the bass player. And we have not used our vetoes yet.
Who do you got?
Bass players? Yeah. So bass player, couple. I mentioned two of these guys earlier. And so first one is Jack Bruce. I think once again all in alphabetical order, and I got 3 B's in a row. So here we go. Jack Bruce. We talked about Cream. Cliff Burton from Metallica, and super short discography. 4 albums, but in terms of influence in the hard rock area, he's huge. And then Geezer Butler, aforementioned Geezer Butler, just because, foundationally speaking, I thought he was really important. And then Billy Sheehan, who is one of those, he's kind of like the bass wanker, So I kind of looked at it largely in terms of it, and it ended up being somewhat, this is definitely hard rock heavy. I did have other considerations though, because I don't think we went through some of the other honorable mentions. So I guess I'll mention them here, and I'll start with the guy that you've probably not heard of, and so we could just get over with, is John Young, who is the bass player for Dream Theater, another Berkeley guy, excellent player, but one of those geek bass players. I think Paul McCartney is kind of an understated bass player.
Yes, and yes.
So I actually had him on my honorable mention. 2 guys that you may not expect me to have, but I thought these 2 guys are outstanding players. One is Les Claypool from Primus. Yep. Just lots of weird stuff that he does on the bass. And then Flea from Red Hot Chili Peppers.
It's on my list.
Yeah, list. I think Flea is a guy who is I think Red Hot Chili Peppers overall as a band is somewhat overrated, but Flea is underrated. That's kind of my feeling on it. And then I have 3 other guys from my my area of music. Steve Harris from Iron Maiden, who before I heard Billy Sheehan, I thought was the greatest bassist ever, and then I heard Billy Sheehan and said, "Oh, never mind." a guy named Glenn Hughes, who's done Deep Purple and a lot of other stuff. Also a great singer. And then the last one is Lemmy, who this kind of goes back to some of the stuff you said earlier. There is a very distinct playing style to Lemmy's bass playing and also his tone that just kind of really unmistakable. And obviously his voice is unmistakable, but he kind of plays bass almost like a rhythm guitar in many ways. So that's my honorable mention list.
So I don't have an honorable mention list. I just got my list. And I thought about Les Claypool, but again, I put him, for me, just in the Neil Peart thing where it's just like, yeah, absolutely amazing, but I can only listen to so much of it. Even though I like it when I listen to it, it's like, yeah, but my four are the following: Flea. And I agree up until Mother's Milk, up until the album. And I think Mother's Milk was their fourth album, maybe their fifth album. Red Hot Chili Peppers fucking killed it. Absolutely. Socks on Their Cocks. Absolutely. The Abbey Road EP. Just killed it. And then once Californication, or I'm trying to think of the name of their song that came out, everything after that, they were just a different band. And I think, whether it's a sobering up and X number of, drummers, guitar players have died.
Going from Frusciante to Navarro, I think changed them a little bit too. So
up to them. But either way, I mean, Flea is Flea. I mean, he's when you got one name and everybody knows it, name. Thank you. The name that I don't think will shock you that I have on my list is Ad Rock from the Beastie Boys.
Okay. Yeah.
Again, the Beastie Boys, and I just implore you, if you like rock documentaries, it was on Apple TV Plus. I don't know what it's on, but there was an amazing. It's a stage show. It's the two remaining members walking through their history, and it's really, dude, they put it all out there. Like it's emotional, it's hilarious, but Ad Rock, especially, I mean, they learned to play their instruments after their first album. And, well, that's not 100% true. They were a punk band before that. They were a speed metal punk band before that. Yeah. Their first album was what it was. Yeah. And then they went back to playing musician. And some of the stuff that he's done just on the bass, honestly, give me a better bass line and rock music in the last 20 years than Sabotage. Yeah. Like that bass and Sabotage, it just has no right being that fucking awesome. And then the next two, I'm not kidding when I say this, you're gonna laugh. I expect you to laugh.
Okay.
I can't believe this is coming out of my mouth.
Okay.
John Taylor of Duran Duran.
Yeah, good bass player. Yep.
Management a few years ago, I was talking to he's good, but I don't know. She ended up doing a little research and sending me isolated, people who have access to this have gone in and isolated. I'll post it. The isolated bass track to Rio. Holy fucking shit. And then over the pandemic, he was giving free bass lessons. One of the greatest bass places. And he's using these terms. He's like, okay, I sometimes play the song like this, but then there's this thing called syncopation. Yeah. And it makes it sound like this. And that's how you take this. And my head's like, wait a minute. I don't remember applying for Berkeley, but
I think he's definitely hugely underrated, right? And I think it was more noticeable to me when he did Power Station.
Right.
I think within that framework, I think, and nothing against Andy Taylor, but was it Bernard Shaw? Is that his? No, that's the news anchor. But the drummer that they had for the Power Station, I think he came from Chic. Maybe he was just a better, fit, stylistically. Right. Something, that's what he wanted to play. But yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And again, he's one of those bass players who, wait, the bass player and the singer are the two most popular ones in the band. And And by far, and John Taylor, and he's renowned in bass playing circles by people who just look at him. And honestly, the next bass player, I've already mentioned him, and it sounds like, oh, it's just your buddy. I really have had the honor, or like, are there better guitarists than my friend Dan? Sure. I do not know, and I never will know a better lyricist in my life. And I've been lucky to be in a band with him forever. And John Hunt, he now has a band called Decade Show. His last band, Five Head, has probably put out two of my top 10 favorite albums are from his, and he plays guitar he sings and plays guitar in those bands. But as a bass player and what he's done in, our band and Silver Scooter and other bands along the way, I honestly, it's one of those things. It's like, wait a minute. It's like, how did I get to be in a band with somebody who writes this good and plays that well? And I'm hoping that by playing really, really fast, it makes up for not being really, really good. But those are my four: Flea, John Taylor, John Hunt, and Ad Rock from the Beastie Boys.
John Hunt is your friend's name?
John Hunt, yep.
Okay. So let's talk about Ad Rock first, because according to the Wikipedia, he played guitar and Adam Yauch he played guitar and Adam Yauch played bass.
Yeah, Ad Rock. I'm sorry. Right. I'm right.
We're talking about Adam Yauch. Okay.
Right. And again, the bass
MCA.
line.
Okay.
The bass line to if it was only that one song, it's not that one song, but if it was only the song Sabotage, I'd have him on my list.
Sure. Okay.
MCA. Sorry.
What are you, Canadian?
Sorry.
All right. Who are you entering as your automatic?
John Hunt.
John Hunt. That is a good call, because you'll never, we're not going to, I would have just vetoed you before you started rambling on about him. You know what? I actually struggled with it, and I thought I came to a conclusion, and I still struggle with it. But I think I'm going to put Billy Sheehan in there, because he is the wankerest of them all. And you know what? I am going to make things a little bit quick this time around, and I'm going to give you Flea, because I had him on my honorable mention. And, I really think, I have no problem, I have 100% problem with John Hunt, because I know nothing about him, but I would have had no problems with Flea being in that list.
Right.
And so I got Jack Bruce, Cliff Burton, Geezer Butler, Adam Yauch, and John Taylor. So you want to argue for somebody first, or
he's probably a better bass player, John Taylor, but I like MCA and the Beastie Boys. The Beastie Boys. I mean, when management plays Duran Duran, which isn't an everyday thing, but it's almost every, especially now that they have a new album out and they were on like Good Morning America last week. They were on I think they were on Jimmy Kimmel last night. So they're great. But dude, the Beasties are just a desert island band for me.
Yeah, I get it. Yeah, no. Yeah.
So I would make an argument for MCA.
Yeah. I'm going to the guy that I should push is really Jack Bruce, because that guy, and he actually kind of has a wide range of stuff that he had done. He had done a lot of jazz stuff. He plays a fretless bass a lot of the times, kind of like Sting. Mm-hmm. He does a lot of wacky things. But I'm going to push for Cliff Burton, number one, because, and so this is going to be interesting, because now we're going to a battle of two dead guys.
So we don't have to worry about hurting somebody's feelings.
Nobody, people's feelings will be hurt if they actually, listen to this crap. But because nobody's listening, we're hurting nobody's feelings, except each other's. So I'm going to say Cliff Burton only because I actually personally think Metallica is somewhat of an overrated band, and I understand their importance at that time, but I think that a lot of their music sound really dated to me in many ways, compared to, say, a band where the leader is a guy who I really, really dislike, but I really like their music, Megadeth.
Oh,
Strangely enough, a guy that got kicked out of Metallica for being too much of an alcoholic for Metallica,
which is
but
hysterical.
yeah. So yeah, if you're, if Metallica tells you you're too much of an alcoholic, you're too much of an alcoholic. Anyway, I digress.
No. Yeah, I remember that. When they threw out the drummer, when Slash comes to you and says, "Dude,"
yeah, Steven Adler. Yeah, if you're taking too much drugs for Guns N' Roses, you're taking too much drugs. So yeah. So anyway, I think Cliff Burton basically helped to kind of redirect metal in a direction that didn't exist before. I think that whole thrash movement essentially redirected metal in a completely different way. And I think in some ways they took some of the mantle, and people hate it when I make this argument, but I think they took a lot of what was punk, and then the kind of the energy and the rawness and the power that was punk was directed in metal, because I think a lot of metal was at that time that kind of the big showy symphonic Iron Maiden-ish kind of stuff.
Right.
And these guys took it to a more fundamental, guttural, rudimentary thing. But Cliff Burton was a guy who within that framework had a lot of technique and a lot of creativity, and he just kind of like Geezer Butler, he kind of turned bass into a very different instrument than it was, not just within the metal sphere, but just overall. I just think that he's a guy that was a revolutionary guy, and unfortunately only in 4 albums. So that's the guy I'm going to argue for.
But and those are always my kind of arguments: is A, do you really like it, and B, what was the significance to it? It's like, because we like Les Claypool is just in a different class by himself. It's just yeah. So I mean, Flea and him kind of having a similar little thing, but yeah, Wes Claypool. But I if I'm gonna listen to something, yeah, I can take a couple Primus songs. I mean, I'll turn them way up, and they're great. Jerry was a race car driver and stuff.
Yeah.
But if I'm going to put on like 3 or 4 albums back to back, it's it's the first 3 or 4 or 5 Flea albums with the Chili Peppers.
Yeah. And it was so funny story. Les Claypool auditioned for Metallica. I don't know if you've heard that story.
I did not.
Yeah, not only did he audition for Metallica, I think it sounded like he thought that he had a good chance to get in, because he actually already knew Kirk Hammett, the guitar player. I think they were already friends, so he thought he had an in, but no, he actually did not make it, which was kind of unfortunate, because the guy that they did let in, essentially those Metallica guys basically abused and bullied and everything else. But that's a different story. I don't have this amazingly compelling Adam Yauch thing, aside from I love this guy. Can you tell me more in terms of how this guy is worthy of the Mount Rushmore?
It's hard to put the Beastie Boys in a category with anybody else. And the fact that they truly have no peers as far as, like, look, I love you too, but you can say that, yeah, they're in the same class as The Cure, or you know what I mean? It's the same thing. You can say so many of these bands that I like, Buffalo Tom and Dinosaur
Right.
Jr., very similar. I don't know anybody that you could say, oh yeah, they're like the Beastie Boys, and their unique sound, the uniqueness of their sound is what really does it for me. Why I think groundbreaking, and to date, the other 2 guys from the band have been like, yeah, we're not getting a third guy going on. It's like to get a studio guy who can play his stuff, but it ain't him playing it, and it ain't the same. And yeah, we're just done, which is great and sad, but I get it.
I think though, the basic, challenge with that argument is that, like, I could say the same about the Beatles, but I am not putting Ringo Starr anywhere near a drummer Mount Rushmore. So
no, he did some great stuff. I mean, he actually.
I'm not saying that he didn't, but
I mean, on one hand, I joke all the time. It's like, if you can count to 4, guess what? You just nailed half the Beatle catalog. But then there's some other stuff you listen to, like Tomorrow Never Knows, Ticket to Ride, and there's some of this just, and it's funny. I actually saw him on an interview a few years ago. There was a couple big drummers, like, I don't get the pause on. I forget what song he was playing. And he's like, oh, well, when we recorded that, I was playing on he's left-handed.
Right.
And he was playing on a right-handed drum. So he had to turn the kit around. So it was a little off for him to go from the hi-hat to the ride. And that's where the half note missing note comes from. That kind of gave it that, that little panache, that little, je ne sais quoi. And he's like, yeah, it wasn't anything special. It was just hard for me to, get over there in time and get back. But no, he's not. You don't put him on a Mount Rushmore of he and again, he filled in for Pete. Well, he didn't fill in. He replaced Pete Best the week before they got signed, because Pete Best was the most popular one. And they're like, fuck, the drummer's going to get all the attention. Let's get him out of town and get this guy Ringo. Anybody who fits a suit, I mean, can you count
with a big
4?
nose?
The lovable loser. But anyways, no, I mean, that's my rationale. It's like there's no band like the Beasties. His bass sound was his own.
Is there a band like Metallica?
Megadeth? I mean,
they're classified similarly, but.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like, so yeah, I mean, I'm not going to say, oh yeah, he's stylistically better. He's more complex. He's more dynamic. I love the sound.
I'm not going to argue the complexity or the technical prowess thing, but I just say as a pure bass player, if you throw in Adam Yauch as a bass player and just put him out there, and considering the fact that you got his name wrong, I'm really thinking that.
Because I was thinking of that documentary. It's like, at Rockin', and he's a fucking great drummer. Like, that's a rhythm section. Anyways, and again, an underrated drummer, because people, when you think the Beastie Boys, you think "Fight for Your Right" and the song. Their first album, dude. It changed music, but they grew so much from that. They grew so much.
That first album was the first album, right? But I mean, it's the the later albums, right, that really made them great, right? That's the stuff that
Yeah, I mean, that was a fun party frat boy album that they literally grew out of. And
I think Slayer's Kerry King was in that first video.
Really? Yeah. That's hysterical.
Yeah, because I think they're both out of is it Def Jam? Were they a Def Jam?
They were a Def Jam band. Yep.
Right. So, yeah. So I think I think that's why, right? So, but like Paul's Boutique, right? That's the one that everybody kind of hails as like this. That's kind of like the pinnacle one, right?
That's like the turning point,
right?
It's like, but yeah, no, I mean, I'm happy that Flea and I got John in the list. So the other two, I can't say these guys are better. And if you're passionate, well, who's your automatic?
I put in Billy Sheehan.
Billy Sheehan. Okay.
Yeah.
So, I find you rounding out, the fourth one with your beloved Metallica.
Fine. Okay, cool. All right, we're done. So here's our list. Our drummers, John Bonham, Tom McGinnis, Cozy Powell, because I'm a jerk, and Neil Peart. And then for the bassist, John Hunt, because Jacques a jerk, Billy Sheehan, Flea, and Cliff Burton.
We'll do well, accordion players. So I'll go first. Weird Al.
Accordion players. I'm gonna go harp players.
I will take who is Harpo Marx for 500. All right, we will circle back and maybe next week do guitar and singers.
Sure. All right, we'll talk next time.